I'm Pastor Tim Gerbing from Christ Lutheran Church in Pewaukee, Erin, and Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. Today we consider some words from the Apostle Paul, which he wrote in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 1. As a prisoner of the Lord, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you received. Paul calls himself here a prisoner of the Lord. And he's not just using a metaphor. He really had been in prison, and more than once. He would spend his final days in prison until just before he was brought out to be executed. Often when I consider how Paul's life turned out, I wonder how his mother felt. We don't know anything about her, but I assume that she was like any other mom, a mother who would have wanted a good life for her son. Paul's life started out in a good way. He was born a Roman citizen that gave him rights that hardly any Jews enjoyed. He was highly educated, and he became a highly regarded religious leader of the Jews. That all changed when he became a Christian. After becoming a leader in the Christian church, he would experience a ton of suffering. The early church father Clement mentions Paul being imprisoned 7 times. Paul would write that he was flogged severely 5 times, was beaten with rods 3 times, was once stoned and left for dead, was shipwrecked 3 times, and drifted in the open sea for a day and a half, and that was just part of all that he endured. If you're a parent, would you want that kind of life for your child? If Paul's mom had known what her son would face in the final 30 years of his life, would she have been happy? Throughout history, God has called very few people to suffer for believing in his son the way that Paul suffered. And yet, Paul would not have changed things if God had allowed him to. It was all worth it. It was all worth it to Paul because the persecutions that he went through gave proof that the glory Jesus won for him was so great and so valuable that he was willing to suffer whatever it took so that we would believe. Paul understood that Jesus suffered far more for us than what Paul himself would ever suffer. Jesus suffered abuse throughout his own life. Jesus was hated. His life was often threatened. One of his closest companions turned out to be a traitor, and the very people he came from would reject him. But more than that, Jesus suffered the full force of God's hatred and anger against Paul's sin and the sins of the entire world, so that all who believe in him would receive nothing but God's unbounded love and everlasting life with him. Paul was not worthy of that kind of love, nor are we. But we have it because Jesus made it so. Whatever is your calling in life, live it in such a way that you show how much you appreciate Jesus' love for you. Amen.